I want to turn over now to Josipa Petrunic, who is the Executive Director of the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, and switch the conversation slightly, but to talk about that rapid urban transport and how that fits into this whole picture, particularly with regard to investment opportunities, jobs, and the new shape of society as we emerge from the pandemic.
For sure. Well, really, thanks, Diana. I'm going to build off something that Jerry mentioned. You know, we don't have an automotive strategy. I would say it's even more important that we don't have a transportation energy strategy, because the future is not automotive or car or rail. It's transportation mobility / energy matrix. So that's what's missing. And such a strategy would explain and set targets for how will people and freight in this country move, what fuel will propel them, and which jobs will be created out of that sector. So I'm going to switch gears out of the automotive focus and look at where we do make electrified vehicles and alternative propulsion systems in the country in the heavy duty sector. Sure we do. So when we look at our membership at QTRIC, if we just add up the folks in Novabus and New Flyer and Bombardier Transport and Siemens and ABB and Hydrogenics and Ballard and eCamion, and that slate of companies that works in heavy duty bus and coach electrification, including hydrogen fuel cell and battery electric, with the systems integrated, the chargers, the storage devices, and the systems controls, and we add in the utility workers and the transit workers, we're over 300,000 jobs. So that's not classically identified as purely clean tech, but we would argue that the mobility, low carbon smart mobility landscape is the clean tech landscape of the future. Hundreds of thousands of jobs that are already being created, and a lot of those companies have year on year for the last 5 years been growing. So this is a growing landscape to invest in. Now, if we look at the GHG picture, because if we're talking about all of this, it's not to talk to ourselves as acolytes and believers in the GHG landscape, it's because we believe that actually we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save the planet. So if we're taking a look at it, folks might say, well, why focus on transit or coach electrification as shared mobility? It's really only about 1 megaton of the overall 700 megatons that this country belches out. Yeah, but if you electrify or you alternatively propel transit, it is the same infrastructure that supports trucking and freight. And that is about 70 megatons. That is a huge chunk of our emissions profile. So the reason we're looking at electrification of transit through hydrogen and battery electric at QTRIC is because the high power chargers, the energy storage devices, the distributed charging, the smart controls are exactly what the trucking industry would utilize. The benefit of using public transit to do this and invest in this sector is that you have an immediate fleet that doesn't buy one vehicle, it buys 20 or 50 or 100. You have an immediate engineering platform upon which to integrate Canadian-made, Canadian-designed technologies in a system deployment. So that brings me to some of the concluding points and an example that I'd like to highlight. Our view at QTRIC is really that investment in the low carbon smart mobility sector as it pertains to shared mobility. Public transit and shared mobility applications is really where the rich job growth is, the GHG reduction potential is, and where the future economy of this country is, because it translates into trucking and freight electrification, which is a huge piece of that pie. If we take a look at some of the recommendations we've made to the federal government, and which I believe the federal government is aligned with, first and foremost, I do not believe that this government is going off course with climate change. I am 100% convinced, I'll bet my mortgage on the fact that climate change is here to stay in terms of advocacy and investments. You just have to look at Michael Sabia as an appointment at the CIB to understand that that's where this government's going. And so if we build on that, what is QTRIC looking at? We're not looking at EV incentives to buy an electric bus. We're looking at government getting involved, from NRCan to transport to ISED to Infrastructure Canada, getting involved in systems engineering and systems planning. And what does that mean? Incentivizing, to get to 5,000 electric buses, incentivizing the integration of the buses, the chargers, the storage device, the smart controls, the blockchain distribution of energy units, the whole system, so that we get to a system design of electrification that supports an overall job growth, job-rich systems zero emission network. And that's where we're headed. As an example, just looking outside at Mississauga, we've been working on a hydrogen fuel cell bus project out there for years now. It is not about getting fuel cell buses into Mississauga. It's about getting Canadian designed and made hydrogen fuel cell buses with Enbridge and Hydrogenics producing hydrogen from electrolysis down the road in a distribution network that supports hydrogen trucking that is zero emissions across the 401. That's the kind of deployment we're looking at, and that translates into freight and passenger rail electrification. So if we're looking at that 70 megatons of transportation and that piece of the pie, we're also looking at the transference of these technologies from bus to truck to train, and that is the future of our economy in this country.